Greetings, vloggers, followers, and potters. Dustin here from Dustin's Dynasty, here at you with another edition of this week's vlog. If you haven't been following me for some time, my name is Dustin. I'm a middle-aged autistic man. I've been diagnosed in 1998 at the age of 13. I've been living this autism lifestyle probably all my life in some fashion. Been working for over 15 years, and I've been living on my own for over seven. And I share a glimpse of what life is like being autistic and living with mental health challenges each and every week. So let's, without further ado, go into this week. And I think what the one thing this week is that we can um, start to understand and what led me to where I want to share my talk with you this week is that Sheetz, if you're not familiar, is a convenience store, gas station, does many things. They've been around all my life. They're here in Pennsylvania, where I'm from, and they have since grown to many states around Pennsylvania, to the south and west mostly. But they've been a staple in my life for most of my life. We have two here, just in my small town of 7,000. So, they are pretty familiar. They're a little bit to the east of me and out in the Altoona areas where they began, started, and were based. And I would say that I am known on their reward system as a Sheets freak. But needless to say, one of the biggest things that I would always get, and I would say the past, I don't know, 10, 15 years, was the jalapeno popper. And I just learned this week that it was discontinued. So that changes a lot of things. So when we talk about, that changes because it was part of a sampler basket. And that would be what I would get it maybe as part of a sampler basket or maybe just a whole basket of that. Um, so that changes things like, do I order the sampler basket? Do I not? And sometimes when change and feedback um, come upon us, it can be hard for us to learn to grow and accept those things and learn that things aren't always going to be in place for us. Things aren't always going to be the same for us. They're always going to be different and unique in their own way. One thing that is constant in life is change, so I've been told. And so we have to learn and grow with change as hard as it can be. And even as I sit here and I do this episode for you this weekend, I think, just in the past, 2, 3 years, how much change has happened in my life alone, and how, it was from what had once seemed impossible and letting my anxiety run control of what I didn't want to do and make the part of living of the fear drive me away from what I was feeling, just because out of fear I wanted to avoid a situation that brought on change or something that I didn't want to do, or maybe being told about something. Maybe, that made me decide, hey, I don't want to do it. And, fear sometimes rides us, and it makes us say things, and it makes us think thoughts that just sometimes aren't true. And sometimes we say things that are hurtful to others. Sometimes we say things that we don't mean. Sometimes we say things that aren't even appropriate. But, thankfully for me, I honestly learned how to adapt and grow and learn to roll with the changes as they came. And even to the fact that I was able to see with some of them that they made my life so much better, and they are something that I am grateful for. But then there are other changes that, I wouldn't say I would be angry with them, but they're just changes that they take away things that I had been used to, or things that we were used to, and they made us feel better. And sometimes things change for a reason. and we have to accept them for what they are. We have to manage our emotions when news is delivered to us in a way that that we cannot react, but instead respond in a proper way that is helpful and helps us be able to regulate ourselves as autistic folk and those with mental health challenges. We know change is not easy, especially in our autistic folk who often, rely on routine and rituals and things like that, that, we expect things to be the same way they've been maybe even 10, 20 years ago. And, the last few years, I've had a lot of changes. And it's not that I haven't had change before, but sometimes these were big changes in addition to changes that just would come in the past, but were harder. And eventually they did get easier. And it's still a thing that I am learning from each and every day. And feedback can be hard. Not gonna lie to you, it's not easy. And sometimes people want to dive into what is known as PDA or demand avoidance. Well, it's not. I guess I was raised from a family who, we didn't do that. We didn't avoid, even though anxiety may tell me to avoid it or not want to face it. But you know, it made me want to cause, my family was brought me up to know that we follow up with what we do and we go through the changes, no matter how hard they are to withstand. We get the help that we need and we get through them, through those changes as best as we can. We do the best that we can do to get through as much as we can and as easy as we can with whatever help, tools, etc. that we need to manage ourselves so we can get through the day and get through these changes that we've had to go through. And it hasn't been necessarily hard. Sometimes it's just brutal honesty, and sometimes it's hard hearing the truth about ourselves. And sometimes people tell us about ourselves because they are trying to protect us in a way so that we're not hurt harder or that things don't come across harder than what they would be by somebody that wouldn't be as easy. So, you know, I think I think it's just, you have to learn how to manage the way you handle things and not come across as, you know, mean and demanding and, you know, um, avoidant, letting the anxiety play its way into the game, being hard on, myself, being hard on yourself and not letting it control me like it did in the past. I think sometimes, anxiety is it makes me want to avoid doing things at times, or, just because it seems scary and unknown, it does bring a lot of questions. Granted, there are new things now in autism since the time that I was first diagnosed, and before that, that eventually there were things now that we have online and we have the internet and other things to help us and help guide us through the way of how things are to be done. That it makes it easier, I guess. And it explains things better than what maybe they were explained to me 20 years ago. Because we're doing the research, we're professionals, the community as a whole is being more educated in, how to help us, and they know more about it than what what was back then. And I think part of not having people educated also taught me that I had to be a little more tougher, and I had to sometimes even autistically mask to be able to get through things. And even though now people know about me and know that things are hard, and sometimes, we're told about things, and sometimes things, aren't easy to digest. They're not easy to be said, but they have some truth to it. And I think, knowing that the fact that there's truth to something rather than not knowing there was truth or that you're gaslit or whatever. But in my case, I knew what had been told to me was the truth, and sometimes you have to do it, and you have to do what you have to do, even though you may not want to. Or you may not want to, it's hard sometimes, but we do it and we push through. And sometimes it's even when we as autistic people want things for ourselves. And you will never see someone as hard as somebody who does it as hard or tries as hard as an autistic person themselves to do what they need to do to maybe earn a living, such as I do, or, maybe, get the things that they want and or just be a part of a community or a part of belonging. And it's not easy, to do that. And you know, it's just part of life, I think. And for me, for so long, I've had to fight my fears and just go and do it. Even though, it may be hard for me, and maybe, I have that family member or that friend to vent to, that it is hard and it is challenging, but sometimes it is that friend or it is that family member that reels me back into place and says, maybe that was the truth. Maybe that is why XYZ. Maybe that is why you were given feedback. Maybe this change is a good thing. And sometimes it boils down to me seeing it, and understanding the why and the reason. Now, sometimes we don't know the reason behind something, like the jalapeno popper, for example, that has just been taken off the menu after 10 or 15 years. But we have to learn to adapt. And I think when we talk about things like eating, and consuming food, even though it is sort of like a junk luxury food, it does change us, but we have to learn to grow with it. And, it's just what I think the way that I was raised, because we didn't know as much back in the 90s, that it was just, I was just under, the reality that we did what we did. I can remember, and I know the holidays are coming up, and we talk about, holiday gatherings and those things, when you would go through a line where you would be served food. I remember several special needs classrooms, special education, learning support, emotional support, etc. Classrooms in my elementary school would gather and have Thanksgiving. And I remember we would go through, one time I went through the serving line that we had. We had made a classroom for where we would eat the food that everybody brought in. Maybe somebody would donate a turkey, and then each classroom would do the sides. But anyway, we'd go through the line. I would go through the line, and I remember my teacher specifically was serving the turkey at the time, and she said to me, white meat, dark meat, or none, because she knew I didn't know. Did I really want that? Did I really not? And, ironically, I like the dark meat, and I still eat the dark meat to this day, ironically. But, those were things that I had just learned to eat because, I mean, for them, there was like, we had to learn. I had to learn just to adapt to things and learn how to grow from them. Another example of that was a holiday party we had at work one time. We had bread bowls with soup in them. Hey, I had to eat the soup, whether, it was something I could tolerate, but I did it. Now I can say, I don't do fruit, and some vegetables I do and some I don't. But, I'm now at the point where I'm independent and can make those decisions. but it's also the reality that if I go somewhere, I might be able to ask what's on the menu. And sometimes I don't have the answer. Sometimes I do. And I learn to adapt to that. However, but I think growing up and living in the family that I had and the way I was raised, because we didn't know that there was these issues with foods at the time, or that I was even autism under the autism spectrum, that I just learned to roll with it and learned to like some of the food as time went on. Now, granted, there's things like I said, I don't eat it, but I've learned to adapt to eating and not eating and how to supplement that, as I go along. And if, I don't want what's on the menu per se, I have choices, I have options, and, that's just how it is. And I have personally have learned to adapt to those things over time. So, it's just, that is one thing that I wanted to add to that. It's, but as far as, I'm learning how to accept feedback more and learning how to live my life as I need to, and learning to roll with changes as they happen. So, you know, that's how it is. So I hope that everybody has a good holiday coming up. I know we're in Hanukkah right now, and for those who celebrate that, Christmas will be next Thursday. So I don't know. I will be with my family next week, so I probably won't do a blog and a vlog until next weekend. And so I wish you all a Merry Christmas. We'll be spend time with family if you can. I wasn't always a proponent of spending time with family, but the last few years has made me more cognizant of that, and that it is very imperative to always take the time for family, enjoy the holidays, celebrate the moments, and so forth. If you haven't already, be sure to like, follow, share, subscribe. Be sure to like me on Facebook, Instagram, X, and Pinterest. That handle is Dustin's Dynasty. I'm on the web. That address is www.dustinsdynastyusa.com. And lastly, I have a link tree with all my links into my podcast, my socials. You can sign up for my email list and some other information. That's under Linktree. The handle is Dustin's Dynasty. Again, I want to thank you, wish you a Merry Christmas if you're celebrating Hanukkah, that too. And remember, you matter, you are loved, you are enough. Take care of yourselves, stay safe out there, and we'll talk at you soon. Bye for now.